Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Wait. Don't click on another video just yet. We know you probably weren't happy with the latest Star Wars installment, but we have good news for you. We really think the next one is gonna make up for it. Fans weren't so pleased with The Last Jedi, mostly because they tried to make it something else. A Star Wars movie is a very carefully crafted formula. There are certain aspects and certain ingredients that the fans have come to expect after decades of movie releases. The Last Jedi tried to steer the ship in another direction, and that just isn't what people want to see. If it ain't broke, don't break it. That's why the Rise of Skywalker is going to give the fans exactly what they want. Have you ever heard the term fan service? It's when you spoon feed the audience the exact things that they want to see. No frills, no extra fat, no B-sides, just the greatest hits. Judging by the newest trailer of The Rise of Skywalker, that's exactly what we're in for. They tried moving past the standard expected Star Wars themes and attempted to do something new. Perhaps no quote represents this shift greater than when Kylo Ren utters the words, "Let the past die, kill it if you have to." The makers of The Last Jedi were trying to move away from the franchise's formulaic rut full of good guys versus bad guys struggling, henchmen with terrible aim, and chosen ones with daddy issues. However, based on the reception, it looks like they're gonna have to go back to the same well that's been tried, tested, and true without trying anything fancy. The last trailer featured a large heaping of nostalgia, showing off montages of the 8 previous movies, emotional shots of the late Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia, and Palpatine's face and voice being present pretty much throughout the whole thing. It's meant to get fans excited that the Star Wars they know and love is back, baby! Over half the latest trailer is made up of flashback moments to some of the most important scenes in Skywalker history. It jumps back to include scenes from A New Hope, all the prequels, and the more recent films. Only does the second half of the video eventually jump into what we can expect from the new movie. In the trailer, we catch a glimpse of a sicko mode C-3PO, who has a newfound, very powerful energy about him that I'm not sure how I feel about. Is he evil? Is he nice? What's with the red eyes? I don't know, they kind of work for him. Perhaps the most impressive shot is when we see hundreds of Star Destroyers hiding in a giant ion storm. You'll notice that these aren't from the First Order. No. These are Imperial Star Destroyers. Actually, if we're being super specific, they're Imperial I-Class Star Destroyers. The last time we saw those were in A New Hope and Rogue One. Then the screen goes black and we can hear the memorable sound of Darth Vader struggling with his sleep apnea machine. This could be a massive hint at what's to come, or could just as easily mean absolutely nothing at all. I'll remind you of the time J.J. Abrams added the background sound effect of an Imperial probe droid to the first trailer of The Force Awakens, which turned out to lead absolutely nowhere. Then we briefly see Rey cosplaying as Darth Maul, and just like that, it's done. Excitement renewed. Okay, so what's the biggest takeaway from this trailer? Well, I don't know, Palpatine? The last time we saw this dude, he was free-falling down a reactor shaft and in the easy pass lane to getting blown up in the Death Star Numero Dos in The Return of the Jedi. Then again, his demise was never actually confirmed, I guess. The idea of bringing him back isn't new either, as it's popped up many times throughout the expanded universe of additional shows and movies. In the past, Emperor Palpatine was obsessed with a sector of the galaxy called the Unknown Regions. He believed that a great source of power radiated from the uncharted region on the edge of mapped space. Here's a bit of a Star Wars history lesson. A couple of years before the Battle of Yavin, Palpatine wanted to develop this region and establish bases, even creating shipbuilding yards out there. Around the time of the Battle of Endor, it's believed that Palpatine ordered for the Eclipse to escape the unknown regions, along with whatever remained of the Imperial fleet. The Galactic Civil War ended in the skies right above Jakku, which was right on the edge of the unknown regions, and from the remains of that destruction, the First Order slowly rose to power. With all this info in mind, and since Palpatine's presence was present in both trailers to date, could this mean that an Imperial armada has been kept secret the whole time? Will Palpatine be back in full force, or is he something of a Force ghost? Or is there another more complicated and confusing answer? This could really make or break the final chapter of the franchise. Needless to say, all things considered, fans are pretty excited for what's to come. They're marketing the Rise of Skywalker as the end of the Star Wars saga, so this will surely have audiences coming out in droves. Consider for a moment how much more Avengers Endgame made compared to Avengers Infinity War. $2.8 billion to just $2 billion in worldwide box office revenue. By that logic, there must have been a large number of people who saw Endgame in theaters who didn't see Infinity War, or perhaps any other MCU movie. People get worked up over a conclusion, and that appears to be what we're about to get. The Last Jedi grossed $1.3 billion worldwide at the box office, so I think it's a safe bet to say that the Rise of Skywalker will eclipse that number.
I mean, just off of the name alone, can we talk about the title for a hot second? Everybody knows the Skywalker moniker carries some serious weight to it. This ain't no A New Hope or Rogue One vague kinda nonsense. The most detailed they've gotten is mentioning clones, Sith, Jedis, or the Empire in the title, but never have they named names quite like this before. It's pretty obvious that they'll be leaning into the nostalgia pretty hard, since they're bringing the MVP of the entire series out of retirement. It's comeback season for Luke, which they're hoping means fans of all ages flock to theaters. Even if he is washed up, if Michael Jordan decided to play one more season for the Chicago Bulls, I'd watch every single game. Luke Skywalker is just one of those names that people will be interested in under any circumstance.
Sure, there's still going to be more Star Wars content to come, but The Rise of Skywalker is looking like the final installment of the main film storyline. It will more than likely wrap up decades of storyline and give some kind of closure to the saga without closing the book on Star Wars as a brand. Then again, they might struggle without the names and faces that the fans are so enamored with. After all, like we said before, The Last Jedi tried to do something new, and we know now that it didn't work. If you think about it, audiences don't really show up for brands anymore. Instead, people are going to movies because they like characters. They see films like Venom or Bohemian Rhapsody because they want to see Venom and Freddie Mercury. Just look at how a revamped Star Trek cast played out. People were less than enthused by the latest installment because it didn't feature the characters they know and love. The name alone isn't strong enough to survive off of. And if audiences only showed up to The Force Awakens because it was a sequel to Return of the Jedi and featured Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Princess Leia, then they're in for serious trouble moving forward. So what else can we expect from the people over at Star Wars HQ? The shows announced for the upcoming Disney Plus streaming service are Jon Favreau's The Mandalorian, which takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, a Rogue One prequel, and Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Those projects will take place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. The animated Clone Wars and Rebels took place between Episode 3 and 4. Resistance takes place during the events of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss have plans for some movies as well, but those are rumored to take place 4,000 years prior to The Phantom Menace. All that to say, The Rise of Skywalker might very well be the absolute end of the line. Fans are extra excited about this Mandalorian series, which is scheduled to premiere on Disney Plus in November. The series takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi and follows one Mandalorian gunfighter out beyond the reaches of the New Republic. It's like a space western. What's fascinating is that Disney will be releasing these episodes on a weekly basis, kind of like classic television, rather than the have-it-all-at-once model that Netflix has gotten us so accustomed to. All this is to say that The Rise of Skywalker will completely and utterly exist to service its fans. It'll be chock full of all the nostalgia and callbacks that you've been craving, and should scratch every itch that you've been wanting to scratch. Expect a lot of familiar faces, weapons, ships, and terms. Expect some awesome action, and expect a conclusion that'll try to wrap things up in a way that won't agitate everyone. They're most likely going to want to play it safe when dealing with a final conclusion, rather than go rogue and risk pissing people off. After all, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss would never take something that's beloved by legions of fans and rush a lazy ending. They would never do that.
Welcome back to ScreenRant. Quick warning, there will be major spoilers and rumor discussion for Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Still here? Good, let's go. In The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, Rey has not only served as our main protagonist, but brought on a lot of confusion along the way. Is she a secret Skywalker? Why were her parents nobodies? Was Kylo Ren lying?
They were nobody.
They were filthy junk traders.
Well, thanks to some plot leaks and new trailer footage from the Rise of Skywalker, we may finally have some answers as to why Rey has no parents. Let's dive headfirst into the swamps of Dagobah and unravel this mystery. After The Force Awakens was released, Star Wars fans were left with one major question. Who were Rey's parents? The foster kid was abandoned on the planet Jakku, lived a life of poverty, and then could suddenly wield a lightsaber like it was nobody's business. Then, when The Last Jedi was released, we were left with even more questions than answers. The information we were given was vague and led to a lot of theories rather than some concrete encyclopedia-style information. And now, with the release of Rise of Skywalker, we may finally learn why Rey's parents were not revealed in The Last Jedi. The reason? Well, she has none. Until the movie comes out, we won't have all the details, but we can break things down and branch out to cover all of the different possibilities as to how she was created with no true parents. No matter which path we go down, all things lead to the dark side, specifically with Palpatine. And some of the blockbuster footage released at the D23 Expo helps build on this theory. What really comes down to about 2 seconds of footage has some huge implications. We see Rey wearing one of the evil hooded cloaks and holding a red double-bladed lightsaber. The shot seemingly confirms that Rey's dedication to the side of good may have only been temporary, until Palpatine entered the picture again. Palpatine's return in The Rise of Skywalker helps connect all of the dots and really brings a new light, or should we say darkness, to Rey's origins.
I can feel your anger.
Basically, Rey has no true parents because she is a clone, created by Palpatine in an attempt to raise another evil leader in the same way that he did with
Darth Vader.
That's a lot to take in there, so let's break things down a little bit. First, let's talk about the crazy power that Palpatine has. Specifically here, we're talking about the scene with Anakin and Palpatine as Anakin learns about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. In the story, Palpatine talks about Darth Plagueis' ability to save lives, keep the ones he cared about from dying, and how he used the midichlorians to create life. So maybe we should assume that Darth Plagueis is the one who created Rey. Well, nope. Darth Plagueis met his demise in his sleep by his apprentice, one who he had already taught all the ways of the dark side to. That person, of course, would be Palpatine.
Ironic.
So even though we never saw it in the films, Palpatine had the ability to keep people alive and create life. And thanks to the Darth Vader comic book series, we know there's one important life he did create: Anakin Skywalker. Using Shmi's womb and the magic of the midichlorians, Anakin was born without a true father and destined to follow the path of the Force, eventually being wooed by the dark side and turning into Darth Vader. Well, clearly things didn't work out as planned for Palpatine or Darth Vader, but no worries, because Palpatine had a backup plan. One where he would create Rey as a newer and stronger force that would prove to serve as a fill-in for Darth Vader. Another attempt at a master apprentice who could rule the dark side of the Force. And the timeline adds up as well. At the end of Return of the Jedi, Palpatine falls down a shaft to his presumed demise. Palpatine has multiple ways to stick around after his physical corpse has been turned into little bits. The first way is through a tethered spirit. While the light side of the Force allows characters like Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi to become Force ghosts, dark side characters like Palpatine must tether their soul to an object. And what better than Darth Vader's helmet? We saw the helmet in The Force Awakens, and the whole piece could hold a lot more secrets than just being part of Kylo Ren's weird shrine.
Show me again the power of the darkness.
Anyway, Palpatine also has the ability to transfer his spirit into other bodies, as seen in the Star Wars Legends Dark Empire comic book. And while those stories are now considered non-canon, the concepts are still there and can apply to the current trilogy, especially where Snoke is concerned. According to multiple theories, Snoke was possessed by Palpatine, mostly as a way to woo others to the dark side of the Force, but pretty much was just biding his time until Rey got older and was ready to be persuaded to the dark side. So here's how more of the timeline works out. Palpatine was defeated by Luke and Darth Vader at the end of the Return of the Jedi. 30 years later, we pick up the timeline with The Force Awakens, where we meet a 19-year-old Rey. So in the 11 years between Return of the Jedi and the birth of Rey, Palpatine keeps a low profile, his soul attached to an object like the Darth Vader helmet, or possibly connected to Snoke by now. But how was Rey created? Well, Palpatine relied on his old tricks, using the same method he did to create Anakin, messing with the good old midichlorians and some poor victim and forcing her to give birth to a baby they never even planned. Only this time around, the mother didn't give the child an attempt at a proper upbringing like Shmi did with Anakin. Just like Kylo Ren said, they were filthy junk traders.
Sold you off for drinking money.
While many people accuse Kylo of lying, it's probably true, but these junk traders were merely vessels for Rey's birth, unaware of Palpatine's influence and ability to create new life. Either way, no matter what path Rey chose, the end goal was always for Palpatine to manipulate her, get her over to the dark side, and have a new apprentice to take on these evil deeds.
It is your destiny.
And that's why the Rey you see with the red lightsaber probably is not another clone or a twin. It's most likely the same Rey. Because frankly, watching a Rey versus Rey lightsaber duel is probably pushing the boundaries of fan acceptance at this point anyways. The whole theory adds up and even ties into some of the loose ends we saw in Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi. Mainly, we're talking about Rey's vision where she's in a whole room full of Rey clones. The vision itself represents her creation and Palpatine's ability to create life. Rey is merely a pawn in Palpatine's game for evil destruction and control. Now it's time to get really deep with some of the possible spoilers and stories for The Rise of Skywalker. According to a story leak from Mark Stevenson 909 on Reddit, Rey's eventual turn to the dark side is kind of short-lived. Once she is wooed back to the light side, she knows the only way to stop Palpatine's reign of destruction is to end her own life, one of the last remaining fragments of Palpatine's existence after Snoke's demise. So after finding out her birth story, Rey will go on a journey for her end-of-life story as she sacrifices herself to save everyone else and defeat Palpatine for good.
No.
Now what about the whole balance to the Force thing? After the dark side is defeated, Kylo Ren also goes on his own journey. Not back to the side of good, but rather somewhere in the middle. Feeling enlightened by his journey with Rey and other Jedi, Kylo is now Ben Solo again, eliminating the title of Jedi and introducing the new gray side of the Force, a complete balance known as Skywalker, hence the title of the movie. Now what would a new Star Wars movie be without some highly visual exposition? Well, if these story leaks turn out to be true, then there's plenty of that we can enjoy as well. First up, we will get to see more of Rey's visions, but she's not just seeing herself this time around. Hearing the distinct laugh of Palpatine, Rey flashes back to her own life, and then to those who have worked for Palpatine in the past. Rey feels a connection to characters like Darth Maul, Count Dooku, and other evil characters he took under his wing. Clearly, all of these characters failed, and it's Rey's creation that presented him with the most control and power. Things only get crazier from there. The Rise of Skywalker will go into depth about Anakin's creation thanks to some midichlorian experiments, and tie all of this into Rey's creation as well. So maybe, just maybe, Rian Johnson was onto something after all. The storyline continued in The Last Jedi definitely fits the conclusion J.J. Abrams is supposedly presenting us. Johnson's scenes were just a little muddled. Without the end cap to the trilogy, The Last Jedi left us more confused in the moment, unable to truly grasp what it meant. The whole junk trader thing felt like a huge waste, but with more layers peeled back, it's all set up to create the ultimate twist in the trilogy, and also proves that Kylo Ren wasn't technically lying. All of these elements help connect both the original and prequel trilogy as well, not just through the appearance of Palpatine either. Rey may not be a Skywalker by name, but her creation was done in a similar fashion, and we imagine using some of the same batch of midichlorians.
Even Master Yoda doesn't have a midichlorian count that high.
So yeah, we imagine Palpatine knows the power Darth Vader had and wanted Rey to have the same effect as Anakin. Between this scene and Palpatine's story in Revenge of the Sith, the seeds were already planted for these plans years and years ago. Because of Anakin's creation, the midichlorians are able to spread throughout the Skywalker family tree. The creation of Rey and the connection to the Skywalker family tree also helps explain another muddled part of The Last Jedi: Rey and Kylo's ability to speak to each other despite being planets apart. While the film tried desperately to distract us with Kylo's shirtless body, we get what you're doing there, guys.
Do you have something, a cowl or something you can put on?
We couldn't help but wonder what the heck was going on, but knowing their connection through the midichlorians and the creation of Rey in a similar way to Anakin, a lot more of the film makes sense, if this all pans out the way the footage and rumors are presenting themselves. In the end, Rey will follow the same path as Darth Vader. After turning to the dark side under the guidance of Palpatine, she will eventually get a glimmer of light, turn on him, and sacrifice herself to help save the entire galaxy. In turn, Palpatine will finally be defeated, proving to be the true big bad through all 3 trilogies, and the ultimate way to end cap the core Skywalker story. Rey's sacrifice helps add an ideal ending, as sad as it may be. With the storyline ending, people would want to see more of the character and her journey, but this is really the only fitting way to end the reign of Palpatine and prevent another Skywalker trilogy in about 10 years.
It's been nearly 2 years since The Last Jedi's release, and Star Wars fans are still debating its merits. While writer-director Rian Johnson may have made some bold creative choices, some fans just aren't over The Last Jedi's portrayal of Luke Skywalker. In fact, many are still huddled up in the fetal position, attempting to come to terms with their favorite hero being turned into a grumpy Gus. But what if we were to tell you that there's a new theory making the rounds on the internets, and that this theory might just explain some of Luke's more questionable decisions in the film? What if Rian Johnson M. Night Shyamalan'd us and Luke was really a ghost the entire movie? Think we're crazy? Oh, undoubtedly. But let's dig deeper and find out just how crazy we are, shall we? This brand spanking new theory comes courtesy of none other than the wonderful world of Reddit. Specifically, we have Reddit user 27 Swing at a Drive to thank for this one. They posit that Luke met his demise long before the events of The Last Jedi, suggesting it happened during his time at the Jedi Academy. But as we all know, all was not well with Luke's little Jedi school for gifted youngsters. For you see, another Jedi was made in the lands of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom. Oh, sorry, wrong franchise. Look, we're talking about Kylo Ren here, or as he was originally dubbed by his mom and pop, Ben Solo. Luke sensed the anger building up within young Ben and feared what the brooding young man and his perfectly coiffed hairdo could become. This led to an inevitable confrontation between teacher and student. The result was the terrible destruction of the Jedi Academy and the loss of Luke's other students. But what this Reddit user suggests is that Luke never made it out of the Jedi Academy alive either. Kylo Ren's wrath was not restrained, and Luke ended up meeting his end there as well. He has since wandered some otherworldly plane of existence. Not alive in any sense, but not a Force ghost in the way we've come to understand them either. If you recall, Luke never learned how to become a Force ghost. There's an art to it, you see. A secret method only the most studied Jedi like Qui-Gon Jinn understand. Lucky for you, dear viewer, we know all about the art of Force ghosting here at ScreenRant. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda never showed Luke the mystical ways of Force ghosting oneself. As a result, he was doomed to wander this alternate reality, neither fully alive nor fully a ghost. He was trapped in a kind of state of limbo at the site of the original Jedi Temple. Who knows what kinds of crazy nonsense is possible in a place like that? The only thing he could really do was project himself into other people's minds. That's what happens to Rey when she comes to Luke's island to seek him out and convince him to join the cause. Think about it. She comes in contact with Luke's lightsaber, and that suddenly unlocks all kinds of crazy visions in Rey's head. Maybe that triggered some kind of connection between her and Luke. This allowed him to project himself into her mind and explains how they can interact with one another despite his being a creepy ghost. In some ways, this theory justifies how Luke could just totally disappear and separate himself from all the horrible things happening with the First Order. In other ways, it doesn't really make sense. After all, he still interacts with Chewbacca, right? He has a heart-to-heart moment with R2-D2 in the Millennium Falcon. He even interacts with that weird green milk-producing space cow. Can you even call this thing a cow? What exactly is this supposed to be? Is there a name for it? Why does Luke look so defiant when he drinks this stuff? So many questions, so little time. Even though Luke asks Chewie what he's doing on the island, we don't see any actual exchanges between the two of them. Chewie just roars in Luke's general direction. So rude. But what about the R2 conversation, you say? Well, maybe R2 is able to see and interact with Luke because he was with Luke when Luke died all those years ago. They've always had a strong bond. Maybe there's a part of Luke's spirit that's always been with R2. Aw, isn't that sweet? As for that super weird space cow thing, yeah, we've got no answers for that one. Help us understand what it even is in the comments below. Another one of the big issues about this theory is that it goes against the way Luke behaves throughout the entirety of The Last Jedi. He's confident in his grumpy, curmudgeonly ways. He's not confused in the slightest about what's going on. He's very specific and explicit about what he's done and why he's chosen to isolate himself from the rest of the group. Okay, so maybe you're right. Maybe this theory is totally crazy, but we here at ScreenRant ScreenRant are a big fan of crazy. Besides, if you look at it from a certain point of view, this theory could explain why Luke was so mysteriously absent as terrible things were happening in the galaxy. This is something fans have struggled with since The Last Jedi was released. How could Luke, the paragon for all that is good and noble in this galaxy, just outright abandon everyone? Luke's being a wandering ghost trapped in a surreal realm does offer a stronger justification for why Luke couldn't arrive in time to save his best bud Han from a terrible demise at the hands of his own son. It also explains why he left Snoke alone and let the First Order rise to power. Because look, people, as much as we might like The Last Jedi, it's hard to believe Luke would abandon everyone he's known and loved. It's meeting Rey that changes everything for Luke. Somehow, she's able to tap into his mind. She's able to remind him what it is that he's missing. He rediscovers who he is, and as a result is able to force project himself on the planet Crate and save the Resistance from being totally wiped out. Then, having found himself and fulfilled his noble duty, he's finally able to become one with the Force and pull the whole disappearing act. Now, for those of you out there who are staring at whatever screen you're watching this video on and thinking to yourself, they can't be serious, just you wait. We are so serious. Here's what we think this could mean for the Rise of Skywalker and the future of the Star Wars saga. Force ghosts have always played a huge part in the events of the Star Wars universe. You have Obi-Wan Kenobi instructing Luke in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi even after Darth Vader chops him into oblivion. Yoda, not wanting to be left out to dry, shows up in The Last Jedi to offer Luke some much-needed guidance. We already know Mark Hamill is coming back in some capacity in The Rise of Skywalker. Perhaps by officially becoming a Force ghost, he will finally resemble the Luke Skywalker we've come to know and love in the original trilogy. Not gonna lie, if J.J. Abrams and company decide to go in this direction, it would be a really satisfying conclusion to Luke's story. But as awesome as all of this sounds, we're not sure it meshes with Rian Johnson's vision for Luke in The Last Jedi. Though it may be controversial, Johnson took Luke's character in a fascinating and exciting new direction. By showing us Luke at his lowest point, Johnson is able to provide audiences with a carefully crafted character arc that offers the character some sorely needed redemption. It's also an important lesson for anyone to learn. Sometimes your heroes are only human. For all Luke's heroics in the original trilogy, he was capable of error just like any of us. It's what makes him such an engaging, lovable character. The measure of a hero isn't just how they handle a situation when everything is going right, it's how they pick themselves back up after a crushing defeat. I think Rocky Balboa says that, and that guy knows what he's talking about. The theory that Luke was just a confused space ghost, not even coast to coast, that's a little Space Ghost reference for all you lovers out there, robs The Last Jedi of much of its emotional impact and effectiveness. Johnson took a big risk by showing us this version of Luke. It's a version that goes against the grain of what we would have expected. And while there are fans out there who are still lamenting the death of their childhood as a result, you have to give Johnson credit for making such a bold and intriguing move with the character and story. To suggest Luke was already dead Sixth Sense style doesn't do The Last Jedi any favors. But enough about why this theory doesn't work. Let's take a look at what this theory means for Luke's character in Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. We've got a few ideas we want to throw your way about this. What if the film's title suggests a literal rise from the grave for Luke? Like, the Skywalkers have been so pivotal to everything that happens in this saga, and writer-director J.J. Abrams has suggested that this film will serve as a conclusion to said saga. What if, somehow, Luke has found a way to transcend the grave? Sure, the title might not refer to a literal rise, but again, we wouldn't put it past the creative team to do something totally bonkers with this big finale. If Luke has indeed been a ghost in both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, the implications suggest there's more to this whole life and afterlife thing than even the Force can provide all the answers for. Besides, the return of Emperor Palpatine has already been teased. If the dark side can rise from the grave, why not the light side too? There's a solid chance this could play a huge part in the Rise of Skywalker. Luke's new knowledge as a result of being a ghost could give him a significant advantage. And while we can easily expect him to pass some vital information and advice on to Rey, how interesting would it be if this theory does prove to be true? Perhaps Luke will come back with some new mastery of the Force. He can teach Rey all about his super cool Force skills, and she can use that knowledge to defeat Kylo Ren, the Emperor, and the dark side of the Force all in one swift stroke. Not too shabby, right? Regardless of the manner of his return, there is no doubt about it. Luke Skywalker is coming back, baby. Though the how of his return might still be in question, we can still get excited about his returning in some capacity, right? Regardless of whether or not Luke was a ghost in The Last Jedi, he has finally managed to come to terms with who he is, and he seems at peace. And now that he's gotten his little temper tantrum out of the way, maybe we'll get a chance to see him be the Jedi Master we all know and love. One can only hope, right? Or should we say, one can only new hope. You see? You see what we did there? We'll just let ourselves out.
Join us and together we'll theorize about Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Like the rest of Star Wars fandom, we were shocked to learn about actor Ian McDiarmid's return as Emperor Palpatine in the last installment in the Skywalker story. But what threat does he pose to the galaxy in this flick? And how will he truly bring about his final revenge of the Sith? Could it be that Palpatine stole the Knights of Ren for his own purposes? Might Kylo Ren turn back to the light side before this trilogy is through? Come on a journey with us and find out. We here at ScreenRant have a bad feeling about Palpatine's plans. But here's the good news. It means that the Knights of Ren will finally be at the forefront of a Star Wars movie's storyline. Let's face it, since the band of evil soldiers were introduced in Rey's Force vision back in The Force Awakens, we've been waiting for the Knights of Ren to enter the Star Wars storyline in some meaningful way. While Kylo just might be the most interesting character in the latest trilogy of Star Wars movies, we haven't really seen a Star Wars film where our heroes must face off against a small group of dark side agents. It's usually just been the good guys versus a bunch of inept stormtroopers and a single big bad in the form of Vader, or a single big bad in the form of Vader fanboy, Kylo Ren. The Rise of Skywalker trailer, revealed at Celebration 2019, did give us a glimpse of fight scenes where Kylo Ren was fighting alongside, and then seemingly against, the new Red Sith troopers, and perhaps even some of the Knights of Ren themselves. Could this be the reason why the Knights of Ren weren't even in The Last Jedi? We all thought it was pretty curious that Kylo Ren's group of fellow defectors from Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy weren't even in Episode 8. After making a cameo in Episode 7, being the subject of numerous fan theories in the time between the release of Episode 7 and Episode 8, it seemed like some sort of careless mistake on Rian Johnson's part that they weren't even involved in The Last Jedi. With them featured in the story, it might have spiced up the dynamic between Rey and Kylo and Supreme Leader Snoke even further. But then again, in a movie that already had a 2.5-hour runtime, maybe it was worth saving a long-anticipated showdown between Kylo and his dark side coworkers for the grand finale. Besides, since the Knights of Ren appear to have been J.J. Abrams' creation, it only makes sense for J.J. to be the one who brings them to the forefront in his story. So how does this group of rejects fit into Episode 9? We believe, as we hinted at before, that Palpatine's master plan involves stealing the Knights of Ren from Kylo. Not only does having this team at his side give Palpatine an extra boost in power, it also further isolates Kylo Ren, possibly making him more erratic and unstable than ever before. This isolation could play into Palpatine's hands and make Kylo Ren into a better darkseid apprentice than he would have been otherwise. This seems to be a major component of the arc of this sequel trilogy, Kylo Ren's redemption. And what better way to see Ben Solo return to the forces of good than have him fight with his old school chums? We can even imagine a big reveal, in which the Knights of Ren show up, flanked by Sith troopers, facing an outnumbered Kylo Ren. In Rey's vision in The Force Awakens, the Knights of Ren wielded almost medieval looking weapons. But let's say under Palpatine's tutelage that they now all have lightsabers too. But where did these characters come from? And where have they been this whole time? The answer is pretty simple: the unknown regions. This mysterious and unnavigated portion of the galaxy seems to hold most of the answers to our lingering questions revolving around Star Wars. The unknown regions is where the remaining Imperial forces skulked off to following the truce between the Empire and the Rebellion after the Battle of Jakku, several years after the Battle of Endor in Return of the Jedi. It was in these unknown regions where those still allegiant to the Empire built up the forces of the new First Order, and then emerged shortly before The Force Awakens. Now that Palpatine appears to be back, we can assume, unless he's merely a Sith ghost haunting either an iconic mask or hanging around the throne room of the downed second Death Star we see in the trailer, ruined on the surface of the forest moon of Endor. If he's going to figure prominently in the Rise of Skywalker, it's likely that Palpatine has returned through one of the new force powers that Lucasfilm has been inventing with each new movie. In The Last Jedi, we learned just how good Luke was at force projection, so why couldn't Darth Sidious have other tricks? It appears he learned some secrets to eternal life from Darth Plagueis the Wise, and heck, the guy all but flat out said that he created Anakin Skywalker by manipulating midichlorians. If he wants to turn Kylo Ren fully to the dark side or get the little punk out of his way, either way he's got to turn the Knights of Ren and Kylo on each other. But would he have any long-term plans for the Knights of Ren beyond using them to turn on Kylo? Probably not. It's likely that Palpatine won't change his old Sith rules and start his own dark side academy with the Knights of Ren, especially since the Dark Lord doesn't seem all that willing to share any of the wealth he amasses in victory. Sure, he had a soft spot for Anakin early on since he believed the man who would be Vader to have a never-before-seen level of power. Not much is known about the aptly named unknown regions, but it's the mystery surrounding them that makes them the likeliest hiding place. In the hit Star Wars series Rebels, Ezra called upon hyperspace whales to take him and Thrawn to an unknown location, likely the unknown regions where Thrawn hails from. While Thrawn hasn't received any airtime in the films, the character is a fan favorite, and as one of the few non-human officers in the Empire, he likely had some valuable information for Palpatine that allowed him to move up the ranks in the Imperial military. Another character from the unknown regions is Snoke, and we know next to nothing about him. Although he seemingly met his demise in The Last Jedi, we know that powerful Force users have the ability to project visions of themselves across vast distances. So what if Snoke was merely a vision projected by Palpatine to easily tempt Kylo to the dark side, deceive the New Republic and the Resistance, and amass the First Order into a formidable fleet? Even if Snoke was simply an agent of Palpatine, the former Emperor could have easily been pulling the strings from the unknown regions. And with Snoke, he's a man who seemingly came out of nowhere and likely made some grandstanding gestures to the New Republic in order to gain their trust before turning on them. This sounds a lot like Palpatine to us, so it goes without saying that Snoke may have learned how to politically manipulate the forces of good from the best of them, the Phantom Menace himself, Darth Sidious. Another curious fact about the unknown regions is the whole reason Thrawn left to join up with the Empire was because his government, the Chiss Ascendancy, was concerned about a growing threat with the regions. They wanted Thrawn to infiltrate the ruling government of the greater galaxy at large. Thrawn linked up with Palpatine and the two men gained mutual benefits from their partnership. Palpatine had Imperial forces begin to chart the unknown, and Thrawn gave the Emperor valuable information in return. The Emperor sensed immense dark power stirring deep in the unknown regions. While the expanded universe revealed this to be an enemy alien force named the Yuuzhan Vong, who brought more destruction to the galaxy than the Empire ever did, it's also likely that this power could serve as a concentrated origin point for the dark side itself. If so, maybe this is where Palpatine's essence went after he was thrown down that Death Star shaft in Return of the Jedi. Long story short, the unknown regions are probably the key to Palpatine's resurrection. And hey, if Palpatine can come back, maybe Luke can too. At the end of the day though, this is all wishful thinking. The only thing we know for sure, based on split-second images from the trailer, is that Kylo faces off against a Knight of Ren. The Knights of Ren don't seem to be alone in their fight against any opposition, as the Sith troopers appear to be loyal to Palpatine himself. It's interesting to note that their helmet design matches that of the clone troopers of Kamino, and you might be surprised to learn that the water planet Kamino from Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones is in the unknown regions. In the Star Wars cover story in Vanity Fair from early 2019, a photograph showed J.J. Abrams directing the Knights of Ren on a desert planet. Celebrity photographer Annie Leibovitz has created shots in exotic locales that have nothing to do with the storylines for previous Vanity Fair Star Wars cover stories, yet it makes total sense for a Knights of Ren to have been hiding out on a desert location all this time. Plus, with JJ in the shot, it's probable that this was a scene from the film and not some random photo op. Yeah, we expect this band of not-so-merry men, and possibly women as well, to be back with a vengeance in the next film. We may not know exactly what they look like under those masks, but it's been suggested that there might be some star power lurking in the shadows, particularly in the form of actor Matt Smith. The former Doctor Who star has long been hinted to have a role in The Rise of Skywalker, and his appearance has been shrouded in secrecy for some reason. He was originally announced to appear in the film, and then his name was mysteriously removed from the cast list. Either Lucasfilm is playing coy, they cut his scenes out of the film, or they accidentally posted his name when he was never cast to begin with. But curious and conflicting rumors have been sprouting up since Episode 9's principal photography was underway. Mainly, the reports from online posters went like this: Matt Smith is playing a young Palpatine. Then other posters went on to say that the young Palpatine rumors were moot, and then he's playing a Knight of of Ren. Either way, we'd love to see Matt Smith in the film, playing any one of a number of villains. While he's got the perfect face for young Darth Sidious, we could also see him as a leader of the Knights of Ren, challenging Kylo's leadership. What if the Knights of Ren aren't a newer order recently created by Snoke, but they're an older secret society that's been around for quite some time? But with all the ground that J.J. Abrams intends to cover, it's not outside the realm of possibility. And if Palpatine does have a personal connection to the Knights of Ren, it links him to every single faction involved in the power struggle depicted in the Rise of Skywalker. It raises the stakes and gives a good reason for how Palpatine could possibly be in the perfect position to steal the Knights of Ren's allegiance from Kylo.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? How about Palpatine the Hooded and Crusty? It's not a story the Jedi would tell you, it's a Sith legend, and it's one we just might learn a ton more about in the next Star Wars sequel. Join ScreenRant as we delve into the Star Wars franchise's past in order to predict the future. There are many unconfirmed rumors about Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, and perhaps the biggest reveal will revolve around Darth Sidious, aka Palpatine, and the fact that he's been hiding in plain sight. Let's theorize whether Snoke was actually Palpatine all along. In case you've been living under a rock or inside an asteroid with a giant space slug, the Expanded Universe is the series of novels, comic books, and short stories that told us what happened to our favorite Star Wars heroes before Disney bought the franchise. Then, Disney took over and wiped those tales from our memory banks. But that doesn't mean they don't exist in the Star Wars lexicon. Instead, these titles are now referred to as legends. And even though they're no longer canon, they still provide material and inspiration to the creative team at Lucasfilm, developing material for future movies, TV shows, video games, and probably some type of VR in the future. In the Expanded Universe, there were multiple storylines involving Palpatine's contingency plans in the event of his demise. It seemed like even after Darth Vader turned on his master in Return of the Jedi, our heroes would face a new major threat every year. And while it was probably an exhausting lifestyle for Luke, Han, and Leia, many of these conflicts likely provide us with clues for where the Rise of Skywalker is heading, especially since many Expanded Universe stories entailed our heroes doing battle against some of the many backup plans Palpatine had in place. During the 1990s Dark Horse Comics miniseries Dark Empire, Palpatine reincarnated himself by transferring his consciousness into different clone bodies. To combat this, Luke turned to the dark side, or at least faked his turn to the dark side. While Dark Empire hasn't necessarily been a basis for many of the movies, the characters could quite possibly explore similar themes, with Palpatine being brought back from the dead thanks to his mobile consciousness jumping into different bodies. Also, fans have theorized that Kylo Ren is either faking his turn to the dark side or using his dark side connections to realize more noble goals than Darth Sidious and the other Dark Lords before him. Whether any of these story elements come to fruition, it's important to remember that, without a highly detailed map of the future in place from George Lucas, Palpatine, the big bad of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, has a legacy that has always loomed high over Luke, Han, and Leia. When the sequel trilogy was announced and the storyline was revealed to be focused on the young apprentice Kylo Ren and his mysterious master, Supreme Leader Snoke, many fans believed the days of Darth Sidious were over. This all changed when the first trailer for Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, was revealed, and its final moment showed off Sheev Palpatine's familiar cackle. This was something new. The Star Wars films have shown us Jedi Knights resurrected in a ghostly form, but we've never seen any dark side users come back. And since old Sheevy Palpatine got thrown into that shaft on the second Death Star, screaming in shock terror all the way down, we thought an entirely new threat would be the focal point of the overall arc shared by The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. Sure, Palpatine is the Senate, but is he really immortal? Possibly, and perhaps he's been hiding in plain sight this whole time in the form of Snoke. Much like the now defunct Expanded Universe, Disney's version of the events between the movies also mentions a contingency plan that was once devised by Palpatine. It involved the Unknown Regions. We do know that it's the place where the rogue Imperial forces gathered following the Empire's defeat at the hands of the Rebel Alliance and after the formation of the New Republic. Under Disney's leadership, some of the Star Wars comic books and novels have gone into detail about the events that occurred between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, but much of the sequence of these events have been left murky. Even more casual fans didn't pick up on the politics that led to the formation of the Resistance, and many were probably confused over the dynamic between the Resistance, the New Republic, and the First Order. While that's great for the many audience members turned off by the convoluted storytelling and laborious pacing of episodes 1, 2, and 3, it does mean it's not entirely clear exactly what's going on in this sequel trilogy. Was this all exactly how JJ and the team planned for the story to proceed when they first started working on The Force Awakens? Well, that's not entirely clear either, but ideally, the Lucasfilm crew will be able to answer all of our questions in this next film. So far, Chuck Wendig's trilogy of Aftermath books, which are in Disney's canon, have done more to fill us in on the events leading up to the sequel trilogy than, well, the sequel trilogy itself. Not only does Aftermath give us an idea of how the New Republic was demilitarized and how the seeds were planted for the Resistance to form, but we were also given a glimpse of Palpatine's plan in the event the Empire lost to the Rebel Alliance. Those Imperials who were still loyal to him were expected to go to the galaxy's unknown regions, following a winding and well-hidden path that was charted by the Emperor himself. There, they would rebuild their forces and plot their re-emergence, either by following plans left posthumously by the Emperor or by following the Emperor himself, whether he was revived by the dark side of the Force or he somehow survived the fall in the second Death Star. While there's always the chance that he Force projected himself during the Return of the Jedi through some complex form of Sith wizardry, it's more likely Snoke has been connected to old Palpy this whole time. As part of their big reveal of Palpatine at 2019 Star Wars Celebration, Lucasfilm head Kathleen Kennedy played it cool. She was quoted as saying, "This has been in the blueprint for a long time. Yeah, we had not landed on exactly how we might do that, but yes, it was always to be in episode 9. A redditor by the name of the 5-Star Man was quick to respond to the Rise of Skywalker's Palpatine trailer reveal, theorizing that Snoke was merely a chosen successor by Darth Sidious. He was someone with an air of arrogance and leadership who could convince young Ben Solo to join the dark side and who had enough dark power in himself to serve as a figurehead of the First Order. Then, once the galaxy was made ready for Palpatine's return, Darth Sidious could take his rightful place as the Emperor of the Galaxy. When Snoke had played his part in getting Ben Solo / Kylo Ren to be fully susceptible to the dark side, Palpatine was perfectly fine with the young Padawan striking down Snoke. If this was all a part of Palpatine's plan, it's actually pretty similar to the way Palpatine reacted to Anakin killing off Count Dooku in Revenge of the Sith. Palpatine's cavalier attitude to the deaths of his most trusted acolytes actually fits with Palpatine's MO. Yet Snoke wasn't just some random fool picked to serve as a puppet for Palpatine's whims. When we're introduced to him in The Force Awakens, the pruny, lanky villain instills fear in his underlings and he micromanages the actions of all of his troops from his covert locations. He maintains a tight grip over his forces in The Last Jedi, and that's why his death at the hands of Kylo Ren comes as such a surprise. We don't see it coming because the scene in Snoke's throne room has actually played out much like the throne room sequence in Return of the Jedi. Snoke appears to be aware of each of his enemies' movements, and every character seems powerless to stop him until Kylo Ren turns on Snoke and kills him, much like how young Palpatine turned on his own master, Darth Plagueis the Wise, when Plagueis least expected it. The demise of Snoke is actually the perfect turning point for Kylo Ren's total and complete shift to the dark side. Up until this point in The Last Jedi, Kylo and Rey's storylines appear to be going in one of two directions. Either he's gonna join her and return to the Resistance, or she's gonna join him. They'll both reject the Jedi and the Sith, and they'll start something new. Instead, Kylo decides to turn his lightsaber on Snoke and embraces a full-time, all-benefits-paid leadership position with the First Order. If Snoke was acting in his own best interest, this is the last thing the Supreme Leader would want to happen. And since Snoke seems to be able to foresee everything else that occurs in the movie before this moment, it's a bit of a surprise that the Supreme Leader could be taken out by Kylo Ren so easily, especially since Kylo Ren has been such a screw-up until now. Therefore, it only makes sense for Snoke's demise to be a part of the Emperor's ultimate plan. And if Snoke was in cahoots with the Emperor this whole time, then maybe it was a part of Snoke's plan as well. Another online theory suggests that Snoke may have been a Force projection, just like Luke's projection on Crate in the climax of The Last Jedi. Snoke is a man of mystery. We haven't met his exact species before, we never heard of him before The Force Awakens, and he appears to have been connected to Luke, Han, and Leia and galactic politics before revealing himself as the nefarious leader of the First Order. The Supreme Leader bears the scars of brutal injuries and still seems quite powerful before Kylo sliced him in half. With so little known about him or his backstory, it makes the most dramatic sense for him to be either a projection of Palpatine or a servant who's given his entire life to Palpatine's cause. Sure, it sounds like a very Voldemort thing for Star Wars to do, but since J.K. Rowling appeared to borrow certain story elements from George Lucas, it seems only fair that Lucasfilm return the favor. And as Voldemort haunts Harry Potter for a decent chunk of the book series in spirit form, his essence stored inside Horcruxes, Sith apparently had a similar skill. In the Darth Vader comic series, the spirit of a Sith named Momin is still attached to his helmet. With Darth Vader's helmet still in Kylo Ren's possession, it's quite possible that one or two Sith Lords have attached themselves to this as well. And with Sith stormtroopers making their debut in this film as well, it seems as if everything is proceeding according to the Emperor's plan. Either way, we'll all be proven right or wrong when the curtains rise on the Rise of Skywalker, and we just have to let the film show us their interpretation and let the fans and naysayers duke it out like a Jedi versus Sith battle in the comments section. As the Emperor would say, so be it, Jedi.
The teaser trailer for Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker dropped recently, and it's got fans buzzing about a galaxy far, far away again. One of the biggest topics, aside from the return of Palpatine, is fans wondering about Rey's parents again. Director J.J. Abrams has spoken about the issue, and the teaser trailer may have hinted at a new possibility. Let's unwrap it and find out more about Rey's parents. In The Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams began setting the stage for his infamous mystery boxes. Perhaps the biggest mystery left unanswered at the end of the film was who Rey's parents were. Rey was a scavenger on the desert planet Jakku who was patiently waiting for her parents to come back and get her. She was abandoned on the planet as a child, and by the time of the events of the film, many years have since passed. Yet Rey hasn't given up hope just yet, as she's still optimistic about the return of her family. All signs were pointing to Rey being the daughter of someone really important. There were many theories flooding the internet on this topic. Perhaps she was a long-lost Kenobi.
It's me.
A theory that gained some attention thanks to both faint dialogue by Alec Guinness and Ewan McGregor during the Force flashback scene in The Force Awakens. Another, albeit crazier theory was that she was either the direct descendant of Palpatine or that she was a female clone of him. No. To be fair, a connection with Palpatine does seem a bit more likely now thanks to the Episode 9 teaser. The running theory was that she was the daughter of Luke Skywalker, and he would have confirmed that theory at the beginning of The Last Jedi. Of course, Johnson shattered all hopes and expectations when it came time for this reveal in The Last Jedi. When confronted with Kylo Ren shortly after the death of Snoke and his Praetorian guards, Kylo revealed that Rey's parents were actually filthy junk traders who pawned off their daughter for drinking money on Jakku.
They were nobody.
They were filthy junk traders.
It was a huge blow for many fans who believed she was a descendant of someone of great importance. The Force Awakens did tease this notion quite a bit. But is it possible that Kylo Ren was lying to her in hopes of manipulating her to his cause, and that Rey's parents are more than what the fallen son of Han and Leia said? Recently, J.J. Abrams spoke to the press about this upcoming film, which is set not only to close out the sequel trilogy, but the entire Skywalker saga as well. No pressure at all. And at first, JJ was pretty hesitant about returning to Star Wars. But here he is, and he stated to ABC that there's more to the story than you've seen when asked specifically about Rey's parents, and implied that while 8 is still canon and he can't ignore it, that may just be a small look at a much larger picture. The story of Rey's parents playing some sort of role in the plot for The Rise of Skywalker only grew once the teaser trailer actually dropped online and fans saw a familiar sight. For a few seconds in the teaser, a ship could be seen flying over a settlement at nighttime. The ship looks an awful lot like the ship we saw in Rey's Forceback scene, when we saw her get abandoned on Jakku. In the Rise of Skywalker teaser, the ship can be seen at a somewhat similar angle, and the specific detailing seems to match the ship we saw back in 2015. While it is certainly possible that this is a common make and brand of ship in the Star Wars universe, that would be an awful bait and switch from Lucasfilm and J.J. Abrams. So let's assume that the ship is, in fact, the same ship that belonged to Rey's parents. Does that mean that we can expect them or some other member of Rey's family to join the narrative of the film? It's too early to say for certain. Maybe they simply find the ship, but alive or dead, it does seem Rey's parents will show up in this film, with both this similar looking ship showing up in the teaser and JJ teasing that there's more to that particular part of the story to come. So who might they be? Suddenly it's 2016 again and fans are theorizing about Rey's parents once more. So let's dive in and analyze the various theories out there to see if they hold any weight. Let's get the obvious one out of the way. Along with possibly seeing Rey's parents' ship in the teaser, we also saw the wreckage of the Death Star and the sinister laugh of the Emperor. Lucasfilm and J.J. Abrams would quickly go on record to confirm that yes, the Emperor is back in some way, shape, or form in this entry that would close out the entire Skywalker saga. The idea that Rey has a connection to Palpatine has been tossed around since the days following The Force Awakens, but now that idea is starting to gain more traction thanks to the involvement of the Sith Lord who is believed to be dead for the past 30 years. This particular look at the Palpatine connection comes from Redditor Anakin's father and suggests that the Emperor is in fact Rey's father. The Redditor points to Rey's exceptional mastery and proficiency with the Force. She was able to beat Kylo Ren, a student of Luke Skywalker with no Jedi training at all, and having only picked up a lightsaber minutes before. That doesn't seem like any skills she could have just inherited from some random filthy junk traders. Her raw talent would stem from her genetic connection to the Force, which comes from Palpatine. The theory also points out that the Force likes balancing itself.
Bring balance to the Force!
With Shmi Skywalker having a dark side son who in turn had two light side children, one of them being the Jedi Luke Skywalker. So the Force rebalanced itself. So if Palpatine had any offspring, one might assume that the Force would seek to balance him out too. With the Emperor being so powerful, the Force would grant extreme light side powers to its new champion to balance the scales yet again. And also is the mirror opposite of Kylo Ren, who was the son of light. While not part of this theory, it's worth pointing out that in the Force Awakens novelization, during her confrontation with Kylo Ren, a malevolent voice in her head encouraged her to kill Kylo Ren when he was down. But who do we know who likes egging lightsiders to kill downed foes? We'll give you a few moments to think it over.
Do it.
This isn't the only connection between Rey and the Emperor that fans are conjuring up, however. Redditor Roy Batty 1602 proposed something quite different that links Rey and the Sith Lord together. Quick warning, spoilers ahead for Darth Vader Volume 25. In that final issue of Charles Soule's Vader comic, which begins right at the end of Revenge of the Sith and concludes with the construction of Vader's castle, thanks to visions from the past, we learned that Palpatine, in fact, manipulated the midichlorians around Shmi Skywalker and was able to create life within her, making Palpatine Anakin's father in a weird and twisted kind of way.
We will watch your career with great interest.
This theory suggests that the people who left Rey alone on Jakku in exchange for drinking money weren't in fact her biological parents, but rather her adoptive ones. Maybe they were good people in the beginning, but they quickly became addicts and spiraled out of control, and less than a decade after taking Rey in, they pawned her off. Her real parental figure is, of course, Palpatine. The Dark Lord of the Sith used the same manipulation of the Force that he used to create Anakin, a technique he likely learned from Plagueis and applied it to Rey.
To create light.
Which could be the reason why he's able to get into her head. This theory actually holds up nicely when compared to JJ's comments about respecting what came before it in The Last Jedi, but also showcasing that there may be more to the picture than meets the eye. If Rey was created by Palpatine, then this fits in nicely with the internet favorite theory that she's Anakin reincarnated. Yeah, that was a big theory for a while there, and it likely still garners plenty of eye rolls when it's spoken of. But if Palpatine did indeed manipulate the midichlorians to create Rey, then her story fits nicely with that old theory. She isn't Anakin back from the grave with all his memories in a new body, but rather they were both created in the same unnatural manner, meaning that they're essentially the same being, at least in spirit, due to their unusual origins. Lucasfilm and J.J. Abrams have spoken openly about how this movie will act as a conclusion to both the sequel trilogy and the franchise as a whole, so that likely means there's some connections to the prequel trilogy. Darth Plagueis seems to be the name brought up the most, with his knowledge of stopping death and creating life being a rare talent that he seemingly did pass on to his apprentice Palpatine. Perhaps creating life and confirming that Vader is the son of Palpatine is too deep of a cut for the casual Star Wars fan, but Solo proved that Lucasfilm are at least willing to trust their audience when they included Darth Maul on the big screen, a character who died at the end of The Phantom Menace but has since come back in the animated shows. Perhaps the filmmakers will just roll with it and find a way to bring the audience up to speed while also keeping in mind events that have already been mentioned in the canon before. The final assumption we can ascertain about Rey's parents is that Kylo Ren was being completely honest and that they really are nobodies who pander off for money to feed their habits. But that doesn't mean they're dead, right? They likely lived on another planet and will somehow get involved in the plot of the movie again if the freighter is anything to go by. Upon discovering her parents, Rey may be angry, but JJ will perhaps confirm that everything that's come before him still stands. Of course, there are wilder theories, such as one that suggests that Rey is in fact Shmi Skywalker, who was brought through the world between worlds and had her memory wiped, which in turn leads to the creation of Anakin, but even that's a bit too much of a stretch for us. But who knows, right? Either way, this is one of the last chances to provide answers, and we'll be expecting a lot more answers than mysteries when The Rise of Skywalker hits theaters.
The trailer for Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker did a great job at getting the fandom excited for Star Wars again.
Good.
J.J. Abrams is back in the director's chair, and the adventure looks to be very unexpected if the teaser's anything to go by. Naturally, the internet has already started producing some pretty elaborate fan theories based on the limited footage we've seen so far. Let's dive through and pull out the best of the best that are on the internet so far. The internet is no stranger to Kevin Smith and his love for Star Wars. Whenever he gets invited to visit the sets, his reaction always seems to be tears of joy. Smith is an unabashed super geek, and as such he's no stranger to formulating his own fan theories and unleashing them on the internet. It wasn't long after the Rise of Skywalker trailer dropped that Smith was formulating a theory of his own, and to be fair, this makes a fair bit of sense. Like Avengers Endgame, Lucasfilm held back on revealing the title of Episode 9, opting to show it off for the first time at the end of the teaser trailer. When the title did appear, fans were pretty shocked. The Rise of Skywalker. What does it mean? Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and they all varied. Smith's, however, had nothing to do with any of the characters. Instead, he believes that the Rise of Skywalker will be the beginning of a new religious order to replace the Jedi. The previous saga film was called The Last Jedi after all, and this new order of Force wielders could be called the Skywalkers and would essentially be the new Jedi Order. By the end of the film, the Jedi will truly be gone, but their knowledge will be passed down onto a new order that learned from the mistakes of its predecessors. The Jedi separated Anakin from his mother and prohibited him from visiting her, which fueled his feelings of resentment and guilt for being unable to prevent her violent death. Things like love, marriage, and deep relationships were forbidden to the Republic-era Jedi.
Attachments forbidden.
And at the zenith of their power, the Jedi failed to recognize the festering reemergence of the Sith right beneath their noses. The Jedi Order had become arrogant and entrenched in bureaucratic tradition, and Luke understood this failure more than anyone after witnessing the fall of Ben Solo and the destruction of his own academy. In this failure, Luke finally understood the fundamental truth that it indeed was
time for the Jedi to end.
Here's a radical theory that may shock and surprise you. Kylo Ren has been something of a mixed bag for the fanbase. On one hand, many think he's the best character in the sequel trilogy, a complex and layered villain challenged by both the light side and the dark side. On the other hand, there are many who believe him to be nothing more than a whiny brat with a temper tantrum. However, all that may change if this theory turns out to be true. This theory comes from Redditor Emperor Death Bunny, and it suggests that Kylo Ren is actually possessed by Darth Plagueis. In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine tells Plagueis' story.
The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise.
And states that Plagueis, a wise Dark Lord of the Sith, lost his power and was killed by his apprentice. Only the Redditor says this doesn't make too much sense, as Plagueis should have sensed his apprentice's motivations and should never have lost his powers. The theory goes on to state that Plagueis' death was all orchestrated by him, and that when Palpatine did successfully kill him, he was able to manipulate the midichlorians and eventually possess Palpatine like an infectious disease, or a plague.
Ironic.
So when Palpatine was egging Luke on to kill him in Return of the Jedi, it was really Plagueis looking for a new host. So where does Kylo Ren come in? Snoke was actually a big darkseid fanboy himself, collecting darkseid artifacts to add to his collection. The idea is that he visited the Death Star wreckage that we saw in the teaser trailer and was possessed by the spirit of Plagueis. When Snoke died, Plagueis then latched onto Kylo Ren, the man who killed him. The Palpatine laugh heard in the trailer will be nothing more than a recording or a Sentinel droid, as seen in Battlefront 2's campaign mode. In a controversial and divisive move, Rian Johnson decided to kill off Luke Skywalker at the end of The Last Jedi. In a final stand against the First Order, Luke was able to force project himself halfway across the galaxy in order to distract Kylo Ren and buy his friends and family some time to escape. The move left him drained to the point where he became one with the Force. Or did he? Luke can be heard talking to someone in the teaser trailer.
1,000 generations live in you now.
And many assumed that he's a Force ghost talking to Rey or Kylo from beyond the grave. But what if this isn't the case? This bit of internet speculation comes courtesy of The Hollywood Reporter, who got in on the fun of predicting what might happen in the 9th film in the Skywalker saga. In their article, they suggest that if Palpatine is able to come back from the dead, perhaps Rey's quest is to find a way to bring Luke back from the netherworld of the Force. This theory yet again links back to Darth Plagueis and his power to essentially stop death and create life. Many thought that Snoke was going to be Plagueis, and that's something that Lucasfilm has yet to actually confirm or deny. The Hollywood Reporter believes that Rey, tempted by the dark side, may seek to find clues about Plagueis in order to bring Luke back from the grave. It sets Rey on a tragic path, as playing with the natural order of things isn't the best of ideas. But then again, perhaps Rey's new Jedi Order dabbles in the dark side a bit, and not just the dogmatic view of the Jedi. So perhaps cheating death is something that's in line with her new philosophy. Adding to this theory could be that Kylo Ren also seeks the same quest, only for more nefarious means. So Palpatine's back! The evil emperor from the original films and nefarious politician in the prequels is set to return in the sequel trilogy, linking the three sagas together even more. But the Emperor met his demise at the end of the Return of the Jedi. Almost 30 years later, Palpatine is somehow back in action. Whether he's a major character in the film or simply a cameo remains to be seen, but he'll be back one way or another, as confirmed by J.J. Abrams and having Palpatine actor Ian McDiarmid show up on stage at Celebration after the trailer ended. So how is he back? Well, there are a few ways to answer this question, so strap in. One of the biggest theories ties back to, wait for it, Darth Plagueis. Yep, he's all over the theories of the Rise of Skywalker, and to be honest, it would be a good way to connect the prequel trilogy to the sequel trilogy, something that JJ said he's done with this film, which serves as a conclusion to all the movies that came before it in the saga. With Plagueis' ability to cheat death and having passed that knowledge to his apprentice Palpatine, many believe that the Emperor was able to apply his training and save himself from death. Of course, his body ended up being destroyed in the ventilation shaft, and it was subsequently blown up in the Death Star explosion, which would explain why it took 30 years for Palpatine to resurface again, as he hid back in the shadows, manipulating events as he regained his strength. But using Plagueis' advanced knowledge of the dark side may not be the only way for Palpatine to return. In the Darth Vader comic, we learn that certain Sith can infuse their spirits into objects that were of deep importance to them. Darth Momin, an ancient Sith, was able to live on as a spirit in his helmet, possessing those who put it on. In the teaser for the Rise of Skywalker, we see that our heroes are visiting the Death Star ruins. Whatever Rey needs, whether it be an item or knowledge, seems to be hiding in the Death Star, and so she must venture forth. But the Death Star was a system created by evil and hate, and was responsible for the loss of many lives at the Battle of Endor. Who's to say that Palpatine's spirit hasn't latched onto the ruins of the second Death Star, effectively haunting it? Palpatine wouldn't be able to leave the ruins, but anyone who ventures into it is in for a nasty surprise, especially if he can possess people like Momin could. Fans really seem to be into this whole possession and Plagueis idea when it comes to the dark side theories and the Rise of Skywalker, huh? At Star Wars Celebration Chicago, fans got their first real look at one of the new characters that will be featured in The Rise of Skywalker. Played by relative newcomer Naomi Ackie, Jenna looks to be some sort of junker or scavenger, not unlike Rey in The Force Awakens, and is said to cross paths with heroes as they go about their quest. Ever since she was cast, however, the internet has been wondering one thing about her character, and that's if she's related to the great Lando Calrissian, played by Billy D. Williams in the original trilogy and by Donald Glover in Solo: A Star Wars Story. In the comics and books, the authors make it pretty clear that Lando is a huge flirt.
Everything you heard about me is true.
And that his flirtations often end with him partnering up with someone for the night. With Billy D. Williams returning for The Rise of Skywalker, the question on everybody's mind was if Jenna was Lando's daughter. Naomi expertly dodged the question while also teasing at the response, stating that Lando is a charming man and could have children all over the universe, and that's all she's saying.
Phenomenal, as always.
Sounds like more fuel to the fire if you ask us. So this one's a bit on the nose and a bit of a retcon, but it's still a valid internet theory, so let's dive right into it. During the events of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson told audiences that Rey, despite all the hype and build-up around her character, is actually the daughter of no one in particular.
They're filthy junk traders.
Not the most glamorous of lineages, but that was the point of the message, that greatness can come from anywhere. Of course, that doesn't mean that the information we got in The Last Jedi is accurate. For all we know, JJ might want to retcon this particular story and have it come out that Kylo Ren was lying to Rey in order to manipulate her. As far as retcons go, this one wouldn't be too much of a stretch, but let's assume that Kylo was lying. The Rise of Skywalker could very well mean the idea of Rey coming into her own and discovering that she is, in fact, Luke's long-lost daughter. J.J. Abrams added fuel to this theory by stating that there was more to Rey's story than we've seen, and that the idea of her parentage is something that he's kept in mind for this particular movie. He stopped short of actually stating he didn't like Episode 8's decision, but said that he'll somehow honor what came before this movie while also giving the fans something they'd like. Simon Pegg, who played Unkar Plutt in The Force Awakens and served as a consultant, said that JJ was tossing ideas around that Rey's parents were special in some way, and that The Last Jedi undid those plans somewhat. Perhaps a retcon is on the horizon, and if there is, it's something Rian Johnson said he's totally okay with. The Rise of Skywalker seems to suggest that someone important will rise up and lead our heroes through the darkness. Will it be Luke from the grave? Kylo Ren being redeemed and returning to the light? Or is it Rey, like previously discussed? Well, what if it's Sheev Palpatine that's the Skywalker rising? Bet you didn't see that one coming, but let's break it down as it's theoretically possible. In the Darth Vader comic series written by Charles Soule, which you should totally be reading by the way, we get a bit of insight into the conception of Anakin Skywalker. Upon learning that there was no father at all involved with the conception of Anakin,
there was no father.
Qui-Gon Jinn believed that this child would be the chosen one from the prophecy, as he was a child born of the Force. Only there was one key piece of information he lacked, and that was Palpatine may actually be the father. The Vader comic showcases that Palpatine may have manipulated the Force around Shmi Skywalker in order to create life, like his master taught him and created Anakin Skywalker. So yeah, Palpatine is confirmed to be Anakin's father in a weird, disconnected kind of way. So if Palpatine returns and unveils this information to the world, tarnishing Luke's good name and legacy, the Rise of Skywalker may actually be a bad thing for the galaxy. This means that Kylo Ren is also technically part Skywalker, part Solo, and part Palpatine. That's a lot of evil swirling around in there. With Kylo Ren now ruling the First Order as the supreme leader, he's kind of mirroring his creepy sort of great-grandfather now. One thing is for certain though, like The Last Jedi's title, which was simultaneously plural and singular, the Rise of Skywalker may have multiple meanings, including the rise of the Skywalker that started this whole saga. Despite the initial hate for the prequels, many fans are coming around to them and are even warming up to Hayden Christensen's Anakin Skywalker. In fact, they're warming up to him so much that they'd very much like to see the actor return to the big screen for a final appearance as Anakin Skywalker, for the closing of the Skywalker saga. Fans were hoping Anakin would show up in The Last Jedi, but were equally surprised and happy when Force Ghost Yoda showed up to speak with Luke.
We are what they grow beyond.
Having Anakin rise up to speak to both Rey and, more importantly, we think his nephew Ben Solo would be an interesting moment for the franchise, as Kylo would get to talk to the man he idolizes more than anything, only to learn that he was redeemed in the end. So while it would be a small scene, the impact of having Anakin return and help put Ben Solo back on the path of the light could be what the heroes need if they're really about to battle the Emperor one last time. There's little evidence for this, however, other than it would fit the narrative nicely and that Hayden has become more involved with the fandom as of late. That's not enough to confirm anything. Until then, this remains an internet theory. There's a lot of talk of lineage in Star Wars, and that's understandable.
I am your father.
The franchise has been established on the importance of family and legacy, but what if the Rise of Skywalker takes that idea and tosses it out the window, and gives us something new for the Skywalker name? This theory suggests that the name Skywalker will be passed down through the ages to the legend of every generation, which is the message the teaser trailer tells us. Rey will no doubt become the first of these new Skywalkers, and the title will pass down through the ages. Much like how the name Caesar was passed down through many of the Roman emperors after Julius Caesar assumed all the authority in the empire. The second canon Thrawn novel also lets us know that the Chiss call those strong with the Force Skywalkers, letting us know that the name isn't unique to Luke and his family. Anyone can be a Skywalker technically, so why not honor the man by carrying on his name through the years, allowing his legacy to live on in others? Who knows, maybe Broom Kid from the end of The Last Jedi will become a Skywalker one day. And that's sort of the point of the sequel trilogy. Anyone can be great after all. You don't need a grand family or history to be great yourself. So when people hear of Rey Skywalker, they'll know that she's not really a Skywalker, but she must be really special if she's been given that title. Those are the best theories concerning the Rise of Skywalker we found on the internet thus far. Which theory do you think has the most weight to it? And which one do you think is the most unlikely? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like it in your playlist every day. Thanks for watching!